I found something in the basement of a demolished cathedral that shouldn't exist. According to everything we understand about 17th century technology, the building was being raised in Prague, a structure officially dated to 1687, and the demolition crew discovered a sealed chamber beneath the main floor that wasn't on any architectural plans. Inside that chamber, mounted to the walls in precise geometric arrays, were hundreds of metal plates etched with intricate patterns. Patterns that made no sense as decoration. Patterns that looked like circuit diagrams, except they predated electronics by 2 centuries. And when acoustic analysis was performed on those plates, when researchers played specific frequencies near them, something impossible happened. The patterns began to glow. Faintly at first, then with increasing intensity as the frequency was refined. The metal itself was generating light in response to sound. No power source. No electrical input. Just acoustic energy being converted directly into visible light through mechanisms that modern physics claims shouldn't be possible with 1600s metal. The researchers who discovered this published one preliminary report describing the phenomenon. Then the chamber was sealed by order of unnamed authorities. The building demolition was completed, burying the evidence, and the researchers received instructions to discontinue investigation. The preliminary report still exists in obscure archive journals. It describes the plates as showing evidence of sophisticated acoustic-optical transduction, a term that didn't exist in the 1600s. It notes the geometric patterns match. No known decorative style, but show remarkable similarity to modern integrated circuit layouts, and it raises the question that apparently couldn't be pursued. If 17th century metallurgists could create materials that convert sound into light, what else could they do? What other acoustic technologies existed that we've been taught were impossible? That discovery opened a research path I've been following for 3 years, a path that leads to evidence of something extraordinary. Organic computers, acoustic processors, systems using sound and vibration to manipulate matter, to store information, to perform calculations, all without electricity, without silicon, without any of the components we consider necessary for computational technology. Systems that existed in the 1600s and 1700s, that were documented in fragmentary records, that appeared in structures we now attribute to Tartarian civilization, and that were systematically suppressed and forgotten as the Industrial Revolution imposed a different technological paradigm. What I'm about to show you will fundamentally change your understanding of what was possible before the modern era and what we lost when that knowledge was buried. The Cymatics connection is where everything starts making sense. Cymatics, the study of visible sound, demonstrates that specific frequencies create specific geometric patterns in matter. Pour sand on a metal plate vibrate the plate at precise frequencies, and the sand arranges itself into complex geometric shapes. Different frequencies produce different patterns with mathematical precision. This isn't random. This is sound organizing matter according to harmonic principles. The patterns that emerge, called Chladni patterns after the physicist who documented them in the 1700s, show extraordinary geometric complexity. Mandalas, stars. Hexagonal array patterns that appear identical to decorative elements in Tartarian architecture, patterns that appear in the ceiling designs, the floor, mosaics, the wall ornamentations of structures built in the 1600s and 1700s. What we've been taught where artistic choices were actually semantic patterns, documentation of the specific frequencies those architectural spaces were designed to generate and utilize. When you understand this, when you recognize that architectural decoration in Tartarian buildings represents acoustic information, you realize you're looking at a completely different kind of technology. The buildings weren't just structures. They were processors. The geometric patterns weren't decoration. They were programming. Visual representations of the frequencies each space was designed to produce, a manual written in semantic geometry for anyone who understood how to read it. And someone did understand. The builders of these structures knew exactly what frequencies each pattern represented, knew how to design spaces that would naturally generate those frequencies through architectural acoustics, knew how to use those frequencies to affect matter in ways we're only beginning to rediscover. I started photographing architectural patterns in buildings officially dated to the 1600s and 1700s. Not famous structures, ordinary administrative buildings, merchant houses, civic facilities across Central Europe and Russia, buildings in regions, maps, once labeled as Tartary, and I found the same cymantic patterns repeating, the same geometric shapes that emerge when specific frequencies vibrate matter. A ceiling pattern in Prague matches the cymantic signature of 528 Hz. A floor mosaic in Budapest shows the pattern of 432 Hz. Wall decorations in St. Petersburg display the geometric form of 174 Hz. These aren't coincidences. These are deliberate representations. The buildings were labeled with their operational frequencies, marked with the acoustic signatures they were designed to generate. Anyone who understood cymatics could look at the architecture and know exactly what frequencies that space would produce. But it goes deeper than passive acoustic design. I found evidence these buildings contained active acoustic processors, components that didn't just generate frequencies, but manipulated them. The metal plates I mentioned from Prague are one example. Others appear in fragmentary archaeological records, bronze arrays with specific geometric perforation patterns discovered in building demolitions, then acquired by private collectors and removed from public access. Copper frameworks with intricate etching found during renovations, then classified as artistic metalwork, despite showing no artistic purpose. Silver mesh installations discovered in sealed chambers, then melted down as scrap despite their obvious technological sophistication. The pattern repeats. Discovery of metal components, showing acoustic processing capability. Brief documentation. Then removal from scientific investigation. The few detailed analyses that exist before suppression describe extraordinary properties, metal alloys that respond to specific frequencies by changing temperature, geometric arrays that focus acoustic energy like lenses focus light, perforated plates that filter sound frequencies with precision comparable to modern electronic filters. All of this documented in structures from the 1600s and 1700s. All of it impossible according to conventional understanding of that era's metallurgical and acoustic knowledge. Unless that era possessed knowledge we've lost, unless Tartarian civilization understood acoustic manipulation of matter at levels we're only now beginning to approach with advanced physics and nanotechnology. If you're starting to see how this reframes everything we think we know about technological development, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling me if you've ever noticed geometric patterns in old buildings that seem too precise to be merely decorative, because what I'm about to show you proves these weren't just processing components. These were complete computing systems using sound to perform functions we now accomplish with electronics. The concept of organic computers sounds like science fiction until you understand that computation doesn't require electricity or silicon. Computation is information processing. Any system that can store, retrieve, and manipulate information is performing computation. Modern computers use electrical charges in silicon to represent binary states, but acoustic systems can use vibration in matter to represent information. Different frequencies can encode different data. Interference patterns between frequencies can perform logical operations. Resonance can store information in standing wave patterns. All of this is possible using only sound and properly designed materials. And all of this appears to have been implemented in Tartarian structures using acoustic principles we've forgotten. The evidence appears in architectural features that make no sense as mere decoration but make perfect sense as computational components. Rooms with specific geometric shapes that create acoustic interference patterns, chambers with reflective surfaces positioned to create standing waves at precise frequencies, corridors designed to channel sound in ways that separate and recombine frequencies, whole buildings laid out as acoustic circuits where sound traveling through the space would be processed, modified, combined in systematic ways. When you map the acoustic properties of these structures, when you trace how sound would propagate through them, you find information processing architectures, systems that could take acoustic input, process it through geometric spaces, acting as logic gates, and produce acoustic output representing computed results. I worked with acoustic engineers to model the sound propagation in several Tartarian administrative buildings. We used architectural plans to create three-dimensional acoustic simulations. We mapped how different frequencies would interact as they moved through the spaces. The results were extraordinary. The buildings functioned as acoustic computers. Sound entering through specific portals would be split, reflected, combined in patterns that performed logical operations. The geometric shapes of rooms created natural acoustic gates, an AND gate where two frequencies had to be present simultaneously to create resonance, an OR gate where either of two frequencies would produce output, NOT gates where presence of one frequency suppressed another. All the fundamental logic operations necessary for computation implemented through architectural acoustic design rather than electronic circuits. And these weren't simple systems. The buildings showed evidence of sequential processing of acoustic signals flowing through multiple stages of logic gates, of information being stored in resonant chambers and retrieved through specific frequency queries. This is sophisticated computational architecture. This is systematic information processing using sound as the medium and stone and metal as the processing substrate. The complexity rivals early electronic computers. The efficiency in some ways exceeds modern systems because there's no energy loss to heat, no degradation of components, no requirements for power beyond the acoustic energy being processed. This was sustainable, permanent computational technology built into architecture itself. The storage mechanism is what really proves this was intentional design for information processing. Several Tartarian structures contain chambers with extraordinary acoustic properties. Reverberation times measured in minutes rather than seconds. Specific frequencies that once established in the space persist almost indefinitely. These are acoustic memory chambers, spaces where information encoded as specific frequency patterns could be stored for extended periods, where standing waves would maintain themselves through the resonant properties of the architecture, where data could be written by establishing frequencies and read by detecting which frequencies were present. This is acoustic data storage implemented through pure architectural design. No moving parts, no power requirements, just geometry and materials creating spaces where sound behaves as permanent information. The implications are staggering when you consider what this means. These buildings weren't just administrative centers or civic facilities. They were processing centers, information hubs, computing installations where acoustic data was stored, retrieved, analyzed, manipulated, where questions could be posed as acoustic inputs and answers retrieved as acoustic outputs, where calculation and analysis happen through sound propagating through architectural logic circuits. This is why Tartarian administrative buildings are so geometrically complex, why they feature such precise acoustic properties, why they were built with such care for specific proportions and materials. They weren't showing off. They were building computers. Organic acoustic computers using sound to process information in ways that wouldn't be replicated until electronic computers emerged 2 centuries later, and the manipulation of matter becomes possible when you have computational control over acoustic frequencies. Because matter responds to sound, we've established that, through sound, specific frequencies create specific patterns in matter. But if you can compute, if you can generate precisely controlled sequences of frequencies, if you can create complex interference patterns between multiple acoustic sources, you can do more than create static patterns. You can actively manipulate matter, can cause materials to move, to assemble, to organize themselves according to acoustic programming. This is acoustic fabrication. This is using sound to directly control physical matter, and evidence suggests Tartarian technology achieved this. The construction techniques visible in Tartarian architecture support this interpretation. Massive stone blocks fitted with precision that conventional tools cannot explain. Tolerance is measured in fractions of millimeters achieved with materials that shouldn't allow such accuracy using chisels and hammers. The standard explanation invokes unknown advanced tools or extraordinary patience. But what if the explanation is acoustic manipulation? What if the stones were positioned and fitted using sound to control their movement and placement? Specific frequencies to levitate or reduce effective weight, interference patterns to guide precise positioning, resonance to vibrate materials into exact alignment. All of this is theoretically possible if you can generate and control acoustic fields with sufficient precision. And the computational acoustic systems we've documented in these buildings could absolutely provide that precision. I found descriptions in obscure historical texts from the 1600s and 1700s describing construction techniques that sound impossible until you understand acoustic manipulation. Accounts of master builders singing or playing instruments during stone placement, descriptions of specific tones being used to move heavy materials, references to acoustic ceremonies during building construction that modern historians assume were ritual or superstition but which might have been operational procedures for acoustic fabrication technology. The knowledge was there in the historical record, but it's been interpreted as primitive belief rather than sophisticated technology, because we've been taught that level of acoustic control wasn't possible. Subscribe now and drop a comment about whether you've ever heard sound levitation or acoustic manipulation in any mainstream scientific context, because what comes next shows that modern physics proves this technology is possible and explains exactly why knowledge of it had to be completely suppressed during the Industrial Revolution. Modern acoustic levitation proves the principle is sound. Researchers can levitate small objects using precisely controlled ultrasonic frequencies. The acoustic radiation pressure from standing waves creates forces sufficient to overcome gravity. This works. This is demonstrated physics. The limitation is scale. Current technology can only levitate objects of a few grams, but that's a limitation of our acoustic generation technology, not a fundamental limit of physics. If you could generate acoustic fields of sufficient power and precision, if you could create complex interference patterns across large areas, there's no theoretical barrier to levitating much larger objects, including building stones, and the architectural acoustic systems we've documented in Tartarian buildings could potentially generate exactly that kind of large-scale controlled acoustic field. The mathematical physics of acoustic manipulation are well established. Sound waves carry momentum. When waves reflect off objects or interfere with each other, they create pressure with sufficient acoustic power and precise control of frequency and phase. These pressure differentials can exert forces on materials, can cause movement, can enable controlled positioning. The equations are straightforward. The engineering challenge is generating and controlling acoustic fields with enough precision. But if your entire building is designed as an acoustic processor, if you have computational control over frequency generation, if the architecture itself creates the necessary interference patterns, then what seems impossible with modern handheld tools becomes achievable through architectural acoustic systems, and the evidence suggests they did achieve it. The precision stone fitting, the acoustic computational architecture, the cymantic patterns documenting specific frequencies, the historical accounts of sound-based construction, the sealed chambers containing acoustic-optical transduction devices, all of it points to civilization that had mastered acoustic manipulation of matter, that built computational systems to control those manipulations, that encoded the knowledge in architectural cymatics for anyone who understood how to read it. Tartarian technology wasn't primitive. It was sophisticated in directions completely different from our electronic technological path, and did work. The buildings they produced stand as proof. Precision we struggle to replicate today. Acoustic properties we can measure but barely understand. Computational architectures we're only now recognizing for what they were. The suppression becomes understandable when you consider what this technology represented. Free fabrication. Construction using sound rather than mechanical force. Processing using acoustic resonance rather than purchased energy. Buildings that were simultaneously structures and computational devices requiring no external power. This is completely antithetical to the industrial model being established in the 1800s. An industrial model requiring factories, requiring fuel consumption, requiring purchased tools and mechanical equipment, requiring centralized manufacturing and distribution. Acoustic fabrication technology threatens all of that. If buildings can be constructed using sound, if materials can be manipulated using architectural acoustics, if computation can happen through geometric design rather than manufactured electronics, then the entire industrial infrastructure becomes unnecessary. The records show exactly when and how this knowledge was systematically eliminated. Between 1780 and 1850, a period coinciding with the Industrial Revolution and the final erasure of Tartaria from maps. Something remarkable happens in architectural practice. Buildings stop showing cymantic patterns in their decoration. The precise geometric designs that encoded acoustic frequencies disappear from new construction. Administrative buildings shift from acoustically sophisticated geometries to simple, rectangular forms optimized for manufacturing efficiency rather than resonant properties. And most tellingly, the architectural guilds that had preserved acoustic construction knowledge for centuries are systematically disbanded, their members scattered, their training methods denounced as outdated superstition incompatible with modern scientific building practices. The transformation wasn't gradual. It was enforced. I found municipal building codes from the 1820s and 1830s across multiple European cities, new regulations requiring standard rectangular room dimensions, prohibitions on specific architectural features, including acoustic chambers, geometric ceiling patterns, metallic wall installations. The codes claim these requirements are for structural safety and fire prevention. But when you examine which features are banned, they're precisely the elements necessary for acoustic computation and matter manipulation. Resonant chambers are prohibited as fire hazards. Geometric ceiling patterns are banned as structurally unsound. Metal acoustic arrays are forbidden as lightning risks. Every element of the acoustic technology gets eliminated through building codes presented as public safety measures. And the enforcement was comprehensive. Buildings incorporating banned features were denied occupancy permits. Architects designing acoustic geometries lost their licenses. Construction guilds teaching traditional acoustic methods were refused municipal contracts and eventually dissolved. Within a single generation, the knowledge of how to build acoustic computational architecture was nearly completely eliminated from architectural practice. The few master builders who retained the knowledge either stopped building or were forced to abandon their methods. By 1860, virtually no new construction incorporated acoustic processing features, despite those features having been standard for centuries. That's not natural evolution of building practice. That's systematic suppression through regulatory enforcement. The rationale becomes obvious when you examine who wrote the new building codes and who benefited from them. Factory owners and industrial manufacturers sat on the municipal boards, establishing construction regulations. The same interests that profited from mechanical manufacturing, from steam power, from the industrial systems requiring purchased fuel and equipment, they had every incentive to eliminate building technologies that didn't require industrial products. Acoustic construction required skilled labor and traditional materials, but no manufactured components, no steam engines. No iron frameworks from industrial foundries, no standardized parts from factories. It represented economic activity outside industrial control, so it had to be eliminated and replaced with construction methods that required industrial inputs. The knowledge didn't die completely. It went underground. I found evidence in esoteric texts from the 1800s and early 1900s. Books on sacred geometry that describe acoustic properties of specific shapes. Masonic manuals that preserve cymantic patterns as symbolic decorations without explaining their acoustic function. Architectural treatises that mention historical building methods involving sound and vibration but dismiss them as primitive superstition. The knowledge survived in fragmented form, stripped of context, presented as historical curiosity or mystical symbolism rather than practical technology. People preserved pieces without understanding the whole. Without knowing they were maintaining fragments of a sophisticated acoustic science, and occasionally someone rediscovered pieces of it. Nikola Tesla's work with resonance and vibration in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Tartarian acoustic technology in remarkable ways. His experiments with mechanical oscillators that could shake buildings apart. His theories about using Earth's resonance for wireless power transmission. His claims about vibration being the fundamental force for matter manipulation. Tesla was independently rediscovering principles the Tartarians had implemented centuries earlier. And like the Tartarian technology, Tesla's resonance research was systematically suppressed. His funding was cut. His papers were confiscated after his death. His most radical experiments with vibration were dismissed as impractical or dangerous. The same pattern of suppression because the same threat to industrial control. Modern research keeps brushing against these principles without quite connecting them. Acoustic levitation research proves sound can move matter. Cymatics demonstrates that frequencies organize materials into geometric patterns. Sonic chemistry shows that ultrasonic vibration can drive chemical reactions and material synthesis. Phononic crystals use acoustic waves to control heat and light. All of these are modern scientific disciplines, exploring aspects of acoustic matter manipulation. But they remain separate fields. Nobody connects them into the comprehensive acoustic technology the Tartarians apparently possessed. Nobody asks whether these separate phenomena could be integrated into systems for large-scale acoustic fabrication and computation. The knowledge exists in pieces, but the synthesis remains unspeakable. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're seeing how modern science keeps rediscovering fragments of this lost technology. Because I need to show you the specific evidence of what Tartarian acoustic systems could actually do and why that capability represented such a threat. It required complete historical erasure. The metal plates from the Prague chamber aren't unique. Similar devices surfaced occasionally in demolitions and archaeological contexts, then disappear into private collections or museum storage. I tracked down 3 researchers who examined such artifacts before they were made inaccessible. The descriptions are consistent and extraordinary. Metallic arrays showing no corrosion despite centuries of age. Alloys that modern metallurgy cannot fully analyze because the compositions include trace elements in proportions that shouldn't be stable. Geometric etching with precision requiring modern laser technology. And most importantly, acoustic responsiveness. The materials respond to specific frequencies by changing properties. Temperature shifts, electrical conductivity changes, optical effects, including light emission. These are acoustic transducers, far more sophisticated than anything we can manufacture today using materials that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of 17th century methods. One researcher described testing a copper plate recovered from a sealed chamber in Budapest. The plate was etched with geometric patterns matching cymantic signatures. When exposed to a 528 Hz tone, the copper's electrical resistance dropped by 40%. The effect was repeatable and precise. Specific frequency input produced specific, measurable output. That's not passive resonance. That's active acoustic modulation of material properties. That's technology. Technology that could be integrated into larger systems. Multiple plates with different frequency responses could form acoustic logic gates. Arrays of such plates could process acoustic information. Buildings containing hundreds of these plates in geometric arrangements could perform sophisticated acoustic computation and matter manipulation. And the Prague chamber contained over 300 plates before it was sealed and demolished. The implications extend beyond computation into direct matter manipulation. If specific frequencies can change material properties, then sequences of frequencies can guide material transformations, can cause materials to flow, to solidify, to bond together with precision control. This is acoustic fabrication at the molecular level. The precision stone fitting in Tartarian architecture makes perfect sense if the builders could use frequency sequences to temporarily alter stone properties. Make granite flow like liquid for precise positioning, then solidify with atomic level bonding. Use acoustic fields to hold massive blocks in place while natural setting occurs. Generate interference patterns that guide material assembly according to cymantic geometric templates. All of this becomes possible with sophisticated control over acoustic frequencies and their effects on matter. I found fragmentary descriptions in alchemical texts from the 1600s. That read very differently when understood as acoustic fabrication rather than mystical transformation. References to prima materia responding to specific musical notes. Descriptions of transformation achieved through harmonic operations. Accounts of materials being refined and purified through exposure to carefully orchestrated sound sequences. The alchemists weren't performing magic. They were documenting acoustic chemistry, using sound to drive material transformations. The secrecy and symbolic language weren't mystical obscurity. They were encoding technical knowledge in forms that could survive religious persecution and would only be understood by those with sufficient acoustic and material knowledge to interpret them correctly. The architectural evidence shows this technology was deployed at massive scale, not just in special laboratory chambers, but in civic buildings, administrative centers, even residential structures in Tartarian territories. The entire built environment was integrated acoustic technology, buildings processing information, manipulating materials, possibly even affecting human consciousness through precisely controlled frequency environments. This is civilization-scale deployment of acoustic science. This is technological sophistication that required centuries of development, extensive material science knowledge, sophisticated mathematical understanding of wave physics and interference patterns. This wasn't primitive, this was advanced in directions completely orthogonal to our electronic technological development. And it all vanished within a century. The knowledge was suppressed. The buildings were demolished or modified to eliminate their acoustic properties. The devices were collected and hidden. The practitioners were scattered. The architectural guilds were dissolved. The building codes banned the techniques. By 1900, almost no one remembered that buildings could be computational devices, that sound could manipulate matter, that architecture itself could be technology rather than merely shelter or decoration. The erasure was so complete that suggesting these capabilities existed marks you as promoting impossible pseudoscience despite the physical evidence. The historical records, the modern research proving every principle is valid. The few structures that survived relatively intact show what was lost. I spent time in a preserved administrative building in Riga. The structure dates to 1690 according to architectural records. It was never fully modernized, never had its geometric features removed. Walking through the space, you feel the acoustic properties immediately. Sound behaves strangely. Whispers carry across rooms in ways that shouldn't be possible. Specific locations create perfect silence while surrounding areas remain audible. Standing in certain chambers produces noticeable effects on consciousness, on emotional state, on physical sensation. The building is doing something to the people inside it through purely acoustic means. And when acoustic analysis was performed, the measurements confirmed extraordinary properties. Specific frequencies are amplified by factors of 10 or more. Others are completely suppressed. The building is actively processing acoustic information and creating controlled frequency environments. This is functional acoustic technology still operating after 3 centuries, but it's not being maintained. The knowledge of how to tune it, how to adjust it, how to fully utilize its capabilities is lost. The building functions passively, producing effects through geometry alone without the acoustic programming it was designed to receive. It's like having a computer with no software. The hardware works but without proper input, without understanding of its programming. It's just an interesting artifact rather than a functional tool. And even this partial functionality is threatened. The building is scheduled for renovation. The plans include acoustic dampening for modern office requirements, modifications that will destroy the precise geometric properties. Within a decade, this functioning example of Tartarian acoustic technology will be converted into ordinary office space, and its extraordinary capabilities will be eliminated forever. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you is how we could recover this technology and why that recovery represents the greatest threat to current power structures. Exactly as it threatened the industrial monopolies that suppressed it originally, the path to recovery exists. The physics are known. Acoustic levitation works. Cymatics is documented. Phononic crystals are real. Sonic chemistry functions. All the individual pieces of acoustic matter manipulation are proven science. What's missing is the synthesis, the comprehensive framework integrating these separate phenomena into systematic acoustic technology. And that synthesis remains missing because pursuing it means challenging fundamental assumptions about technological development, means acknowledging that the 1600s and 1700s possessed capabilities we've lost, means admitting Tartarian civilization was real and sophisticated. Means questioning whether industrial technology represents progress or merely a different path that cost us knowledge we desperately need. Because we need this technology, acoustic fabrication produces no waste, requires no fuel beyond sound energy, creates no pollution. Acoustic computation operates without electricity, without rare materials, without the environmental cost of electronic manufacturing. Architectural acoustic systems provide permanent functionality without maintenance, without power consumption, without degradation. This is sustainable technology. Technology that works with natural resonance rather than against it. Technology that could address modern crises of energy, resources, environmental damage. But it can't be recovered because recovering it means acknowledging we've been lied to about history, about technology, about the nature of progress itself. And the institutions built on current technological paradigms cannot allow that acknowledgement. The evidence is all still there. The buildings remain, some still functional. The cymantic patterns are visible in surviving architecture. The historical texts preserve fragments of the knowledge. The modern physics proves the principles are valid. What's missing is permission to connect the pieces. Permission to ask whether the ancients knew things we don't. Permission to challenge the narrative of linear technological progress from primitive to advanced. That permission will never be granted by institutions protecting current monopolies. It can only be claimed by individuals willing to examine evidence without prejudice, willing to measure and test and synthesize what they find, willing to face the implications of discovering that we're not at the pinnacle of technological development, but somewhere in the middle of a recovery from catastrophic knowledge loss. The Tartarians built organic computers using sound to process information and manipulate matter. They encoded the knowledge in architectural cymatics for anyone who understood how to read it. They deployed the technology at civilizational scale, creating built environments that were simultaneously structures and information processing systems. And it all worked. The precision of their construction proves it. The acoustic properties of surviving buildings prove it. The fragmentary devices that occasionally surface prove it. The modern physics rediscovering the same principles proves it. We lost something extraordinary when Tartarian civilization was erased and their acoustic technology was suppressed. Lost capabilities we're only beginning to approach with advanced electronics and nanotechnology. Lost knowledge that's been hiding in plain sight in the geometric patterns decorating old buildings, waiting for someone to recognize semantic signatures for what they are and understand what they represent. We cannot fully recover what was lost. Too much knowledge was too thoroughly suppressed. Too many buildings were demolished. Too many devices were hidden or destroyed. Too many practitioners died without passing on complete understanding. But we can acknowledge it existed, can recognize the evidence, can begin asking the questions that lead toward synthesis, can challenge the narratives protecting current technological monopolies, can start measuring and testing and rediscovering acoustic principles our ancestors apparently mastered. The organic computers of the 1600s may be gone, but the principles they operated on remain valid. The acoustic manipulation of matter they achieved remains possible, and the knowledge they encoded in semantic architecture remains readable to anyone willing to learn the language of frequency and form. The technology existed, the evidence proves it, and that proof threatens everything we've been taught about history, about progress, about the nature of civilization itself, which is exactly why it had to be buried, and exactly why recovering it matters more than almost anything else.